Hello, everybody. It's Russ Kenzior coming to you from Safety Matters, covering safety matters in the news, and there's a lot of safety matters in the news to cover this week. One of the things that just happened within the last week is related to the NFL. The Players Union is suing the National Football League for player safety conditions, specifically related to the turf, grass that's used in professional football today, claiming that there's a disproportionately larger number of player injuries, severe injuries, oftentimes career-ending injuries, related to the playing turf. So we're going to have a discussion today about player safety in the NFL. But if you missed the story, here's the story.
Now to the new battle over artificial turf in the NFL. Phil Lipoff is at NFL headquarters this morning. And Phil, one player is saying he'd rather get struck by lightning than play on turf.
If that doesn't say it all, and we'll get to some more players in just a minute, Janae, but this morning, the NFL Players Association is demanding that the league ban certain artificial turf fields in order to keep players safe. Sorry about the siren. We'll get through this one. In a letter, the NFLPA is asking the league for an immediate ban on slit film turf fields, they're called, citing higher injury rates compared to other playing surfaces, specifically non-contact ankle and foot injuries. Right now, that slit film turf is used in 6 stadiums. MetLife, where the Jets and Giants play, Ford Field, home to the Detroit Lions, US Bank Stadium in Minneapolis, Caesars Superdome in New Orleans, Lucas Oil Stadium, where the Colts play, and Paycor Stadium, home to the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, the league and Players Association contracted a third party to compile and analyze data on every single injury during every season. That committee presented its findings to owners last month. It focused on non-contact injuries, which as recently as 2019 were notably higher than artificial turf fields. However, the differences began narrowing in 2020 and then last year were nearly identical. Still, as you mentioned, Janae, players are speaking out against the turf. Travis Kelce, Kansas City Chiefs tight end, saying, "I'd rather practice in sleet, snow, thunderstorm with a chance of getting struck by lightning than run inside on turf." LA Rams wide receiver Cooper Kupp, last year's Super Bowl MVP champion, tweeting, "I believe that we and all teams should be playing on grass." However, the NFL does not agree. In a statement released Saturday, the league saying in part, while slit film surfaces have 2 to 3 more injuries per year, most of them ankle sprains, a low burden injury, whereas slit film also sees a lower rate of fewer high burden ACL injuries compared to other synthetic fields. Having said all of the league goes on to say no change is necessary, but more study is needed. And the NFL Players Association taking all of this on, this safety issue, just weeks after the NFL changed its concussion protocol after intense criticism for the teams for sending players back out onto the field too soon.
So who better to talk about the subject of the NFL? Player safety is former NFL player and friend of mine, Richard Umphrey. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So let me refresh everybody's memory about what you looked like back in the day. Number 59. Number 59. Remember those days?
It's been a long time ago, a whole lifetime ago.
Yeah, well, at our age, everything seems like a lifetime ago. But you played in the NFL when? What was your tenure?
I was originally drafted in 1982 out of the University of Colorado in 5th round, New York Giants, and actually wound up playing there for 3 years and then played in San Diego. I was actually the 1982 NFC Rookie of the Year.
Oh, that's right.
So which was pretty good. Maybe there's only 2 rookies that actually started back then. Who knows? So I got lucky. But
well, there's a difference between lucky and just being good, right?
That's what they say. But it can be one injury away.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about injuries. Back when you were playing football, how big of a deal were turf fields? That was kind of the beginning of the turf fields, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think again, as a kid, you grow up playing on grass fields, and then also too, most of your college stadiums at that time were also grass. Some of the higher end schools were actually trading up to turf, but quite frankly, the turf back then was absolutely horrendous. It was like playing on carpet, indoor, outdoor carpet. It was pretty brutal, playing on concrete. So just roll a carpet out and put it on top of black asphalt, and then that's what you're playing on, getting thrown down on.
Is it obviously getting the thrown down part is going to hurt, but how about just a running on? Like you hear the players today saying just playing on the field hurts. Just there's a lot of injuries related to just the softness, the texture of this slit turf.
Well, I think really, from the standpoint of, I can just speak for myself. I mean, the biggest thing that hurt on me after a game, believe it or not, was my feet and my hips.
Mm.
And I think it was just the pounding of being on such a hard surface would really render, that was really most of the pains that I am incurring as we speak today.
So is it just the pains of just playing the sport, or is it the pains related to the field itself, meaning regardless of getting tackled by a 300-pound linebacker? I mean,
again, I think that all that power transfers down through and eventually goes out through your feet and whatever surface you're standing on. So obviously you can't make it so soft and cushiony so where you're really not being able to execute your cuts that the receivers have to make, especially today. But obviously we would like it to be a lot softer, but again, you need to be able to grip. I think the biggest thing is really the grip and the transaction of what type of cleats you really have on. Different surfaces require different cleats and different types of cleats. And back in the day when I was playing, again, that was a big thing as far as what type of surface you're actually going on to artificially, and are your cleats going to match up to that or not.
Did you have a choice of cleats?
We had limited choices would probably be the best thing. You see a lot of conversion of, the old regular turf, natural turf cleats, trying to be exercised with it. And then you saw the really just small little nubby type stuff for it. So I think it was more back in the experimental side of really trying, depending on, too, also weather. Now a lot of the games today are played in domes. So I'm sure they've got a more consistent surface that they can play on. That's probably part of the argument of why the NFL wants AstroTurf in there. It's cleaner, uniforms are cleaner. Because again, remember, they also want you to look nice too.
When we talk about player safety, you're a worker, you're an employee. That's your workplace. I mean,
Right.
The field is your workplace.
Right.
And if you have a safety concern, how open was management ownership to player? All right. Heck with that question. Obviously, your feedback was less than appreciated by leadership management. Is that when it comes to safety? Hey, the field.
Well, if you gave too much feedback, you probably got a plane ticket.
Yeah. Well, welcome to corporate America.
Exactly.
So, which is no different than many other workplaces. Not every place, but there's sadly many employers don't value worker comments as it relates to safety. But as far as input, this was the day before the big signing bonuses from sponsors like Nike, Reebok, that sort of thing. So the shoes you got, the cleats you got were the cleats you got. Is that right? That's what you played with based on
pretty much
what you were provided. You didn't have a say.
No, I mean, it's, you said here there are 2 or 3 brands that you can potentially use. Nothing was custom made. It was all pretty much, generic. And, how did that shoe fit you? Then you had a wet turf and a dry turf type cleat. That's pretty much it.
So technology was limited. So player safety was something that was just kind of part of the job. And you mentioned this to me earlier before we started the broadcast that's the nature of the game. If you're afraid of injuries, this is just not the game for you. You need to find another job because it's a game where injuries are expected and anticipated, but at the same time, you want to prevent them. I mean, today's athletes get, paid enormous sums compared to when you were playing.
Oh, yeah.
And even before you, things were even less. So today we've got, multi-tens of $million contracts, and the last thing the owners want is their star athletes to be hurt. But at the same time, a lot of those injuries may be prevented by simply taking small constructive steps like player field conditions. In the story we just played, it talked about natural grass versus turf. Give us a little background. Why is that better? What is better about natural grass soil than turf?
Well, I think the belief there is, again, it's not necessarily whether you're falling down on a softer surface. It's that you have a higher propensity of the actual dirt to give. So I think, versus, the current technology of the cleats and locked in with the AstroTurf, your foot's locked in. So when you're in a very compromising position, all of a sudden, you got a big guy landed on you, or you're turning real hard. And there are times when, you need that cleat to move. Your body needs that foot to slip out so you can actually don't hurt yourself. And then current technology today, all of a sudden it locks it in, and then the body's just not designed to take that kind of stress on the joints.
You were an offensive lineman.
Correct.
So when you talk about locking in, that was pretty much your average,
Every play.
that was it. You're up, pushing another 300-pound lineman on the other side back.
Right.
And the sliding you're talking about is just your cleats being able to have some give on the field, because if they lock in, it's as if your foot was, anchored to the ground, and that's when you see knees, and I guess it's primarily knee injuries. Is that correct?
A lot of knees, a lot of meniscus, ACLs type of stuff. And you get guys. You got to remember too. I mean, bodies are flying around, so you're getting not only you're not only forcing forward, you're getting a body being thrown into you, where again you're not expected to see that. And so if the foot can give away to protect you, for lack of better terms, the better off you are. Yeah, you slipped, you fell down, you missed the block, but again, you play for another day.
So is it because of the indoor domes craze that forced fields to be turf, meaning no sunlight? We have to go with this synthetic material because, in Arizona, the Cardinals play on a field that's grass, and it kind of rolls out into the sunlight, and they, expose the grass to sunlight and water, whatever, and then they roll it back in for game day. But what's the big reason for all these turf fields first? And there's different types of turf. There's the slit grass. There's all these slit film substrates. I guess they're trying to simulate natural grass to the best of their ability. But is there some ulterior motive here? Some benefit that turf is providing, that all the fields today are going toward to turf, other than the fact they're just indoors?
There's multiple things. I mean, it's an entertainment sport. The owners want their players to look clean, professional. You're seeing a lot more. The game's gone more to a passing game versus a running game back in the old days, where it's 3 yards in a cloud of dust type of thing. There is no dust anymore. It's more an air game. It's more exciting for the fans, and they need the players themselves need to look good, and when they're actually executing the game. I mean, there's actual fines. If your sock falls down, they fine you.
Wow.
Yeah.
What position is most vulnerable to turf-related injuries? Is it the running backs, the receivers? I mean, who's really getting hurt here?
Well, it's going to be the running backs are probably your primary, because again they're carrying the ball. Everybody that ball attracts a lot of people. So
I'm sure it does.
They're gonna be the ones that are in those compromising positions when all of a sudden they're getting hit, turning, dashing. I'd say secondary to that is probably your interior lineman, because again, like I said earlier, you're locked in, you're driving, and your legs are locked in. So somebody gets thrown into you, and that's going to be your next injury. And then I would probably argue that your receivers, because they do so much cutting, and because it's such a heavy passing game now in the game, there's a lot more cutting going on where they're making the move, and again, as they make the move, their concentration is on the ball, not whether a guy's getting ready to take them out.
So you really don't want to be focused on, is the field going to hurt me? You're worried about, is the 300-pound linebacker going to hurt me again? Because every play,
we're hurting them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's the purpose of the game, is to hurt people. And by the way, there's big money in that, right? I mean, that instant replay of, hey, watch, the XYZ player blow their ACL.
Right.
That's what people want to see. Hey, show me the injury. That's on the instant replay.
Yeah.
When they recap the game at the end of the night, and off with them. But what about the whole concept of serious injuries and the process by which players can, they're expected to be back on the field, right? I mean, you get hurt, it's.
Well, as we talked about earlier, I mean, there's a difference between pain and injury. And I don't get paid unless I'm out there. Well, in bonuses and any incentives I have, my brand goes down. And quite frankly, there's a guy waiting on the sideline to take your plays at any minute. So there's the pressure to stay on the field. Once you get on the field, you're one of those lucky, 1 of 11 type of thing, is really, really high.
I assume you're reminded of that.
What's that again?
You're reminded of just how lucky you are to be on that field.
Very much so. You're 1 of 11.
Yeah.
I mean, 50 guys make the team, but only 11 can play at a time. So there's plenty of pressure. I mean, and the NFL, what a lot of people don't understand too, is like you make the team, you can be there for 4 weeks, and next thing you know, you're gone or you're injured, you're off on IR. They got to put another body in there, and they got to execute because they got to entertain everybody on Sundays.
How often do we see that? Usually, NFL quarterbacks where, Tony Romo gets knocked out, and that gave the opportunity for Dak Prescott to walk in and become the franchise quarterback, right?
Yep. And it becomes a opportunity, plus it makes it easier too if all of a sudden, let's say the play is going down or management for whatever reason or contracts. I mean, you talked about contracts earlier. I mean, it's a money game as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if I can get a guy that can throw a ball just similar or quite similar to Tony Romo, I mean, why not get a guy in? He's half the price.
Players union, good or bad, right or wrong to get involved in this?
I find it interesting. I mean, I have noticed as a player that that's why the union exists, and they've done a lot of different better in the long run. I will say the NFL commissioner and the NFL has become much more aware over the last 10 years. Back in my era, it was non-existent. Union had very little power. So the good news is they are coming in and really trying to protect the players. And I would argue that they've all really strived to create a safer environment for players. But the game is a violent game. It's a dangerous game. That's why we get paid a lot of money. That's why we were built to do this. And so it's not a game for everybody to play.
It's a great game for everyone to watch, though.
It can be exciting. Yes, I mean, we have to go back to our, gladiator days. Why we like it, I don't know. So
it's human nature, right? Yeah. I mean, we enjoy that. That's what we enjoy: the conflict, the conquest, the winning, right, exactly. And the losing. I would assume the players' union, which really became very vocal on the subject of player safety, started with the head injuries, right? Concussion protocols.
The whole concussion thing about 10 years ago, the CTE, Mike Webster dying, the whole CTE subject matter, which quite frankly is a good thing. But again, you're not going to eliminate it completely. It's just not impossible. But again, if there is a technology you talked about earlier, I mean, if there's something to do from the standpoint of safety as a player, I mean, you tape your ankles for a reason.
Yeah.
To prevent a sprained ankle, you tape your fingers for a reason. So if there's something out there that somebody has, that the players are very willing to, exercise that preventative measure in order to do it. So if they can do that within the helmet, I can tell you the technology of the helmets have gotten a lot better than when I was playing. We actually had a helmet we used to call concussion bucket. I mean, it was just a couple straps and this and that, and every time you hit somebody, you were seeing stars. So. And they went to the air helmets, and now they actually have them where they actually can, measure the actual impact and the construction of the actual outer shell versus the inner shell. But at the end of the day, it's still a collision sport.
Well, and that's how you were coached, right? That's how you came up in the game. I mean, we want to hear the helmet to helmet. That was the good tackle, right? Square up, get your body aligned, get your spine aligned. That's
exactly.
Now, I don't know if that's still the method of.
Well, it's because of the head trauma issue. They've changed the way you're allowed to tackle and the way you're allowed, head to head and all this other stuff. I mean, the free shots that people like to, to see, unfortunately, where receivers crossing over the middle and bang, it gets laid out. Those are dangerous. They're unnecessary. Right. But now they're teaching the guys how to tackle with shoulders, and that puts your head down your neck, and that just opens you up to a different set of injuries.
Has the game changed?
Dramatically.
What's changed? I mean, players are bigger, stronger, faster.
Players are more. I think we talked about this earlier. The athleticism of the players is much at a higher level at all positions. The athleticism is just much stronger. Their training practices, the technology that they're exposed to as a young kid, going up all the way through the ranks. Nutrition's much better. So you're really seeing they're not necessarily bigger, I would argue, but they're just much more athletic and much more, from just a pure structure.
Well, the game got faster too, didn't it? I mean, you mentioned a moment ago, it was a running game back in your day. I mean, it was running and tend to be boring. And that's when the popularity of televised games said we got to keep fans connected. We see that in other sports, soccer, tennis. It's an action game, hockey. And if there's a lot of action, to kind of maintain or keep a televised audience, you got to keep the action going. And if it's kind of a slow-moving game of a guy running 4 yards in a cloud of dust, I mean, people kind of tune that out. And especially with modern technology as far as cameras and Zoom and replays and on and on and on. It's just an amazing game to watch.
Well, I always like that camera that comes over the huddle.
Yeah.
When you're standing in the field. Like,
didn't one fall off like last week? Yeah. They had to fix. Yeah, one of them came off the wires.
Oh, did it really?
Yeah, maybe that's another episode. We can talk about the camera safety in the NFL. But, the game is the game. It's a violent game. It's a tough game. You go in knowing the risk, but some of the times the risk that's associated to the game has nothing to do with the game itself, but the conditions, the helmet, the fields,
Yep.
right? You might have some athletes that are just better trained or coached, whatever it might be. But when it's all said and done, it's all about protecting people, right? Protecting
Well, you
the
as a
athlete.
player want to protect yourself. I mean, today's the numbers for your own self. I mean, the numbers you're getting in the contract. I mean, you want to make sure that you have the ability to earn that over the next couple of years. Because again, the life of a football player is not very long.
I was going to ask, what is the longevity? What's an NFL
The
player's
average player is about 3 years, and NFL stands for not for long.
3 years?
Yeah.
So let's assume you make it to the NFL. You're 22, right?
You're done by your time you're 26.
Imagine that. What career do you have come to an end at age 25? And if you're really lucky, like Tom Brady, you can keep playing into your golden years, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, that's a short-term career path. But those injuries can be obviously long-term, right? Or career-ending.
Well, one of the things you see too, though, is you got to remember these guys have been playing since they were little, so those injuries compound, and all of a sudden they get to the NFL. That force that you're hitting with is 3 times the force that you were hitting in college,
right?
3 times the force that you were hitting in high school. So your body's been taking that pounding for all those years, and so I mean, anything you can do to protect yourself, and because something's eventually going to give out.
I mean, I can only imagine. I've never played. Obviously, most people listening to the show never played professional football, but just watching it on TV, you almost become immune to, my God, these are really, really big guys. I mean, going on the field and just seeing the size of these, you guys, I mean, big men. It's a violent sport. It's all about massive collisions, right? And we talked about this earlier. You get tackled, you got 3 other guys your size landing on you. And then you get up and do it again. Right?
Well, I mean, I'll give you some perspective. I mean, I'm 6'4". I played at 6'4". My playing weight was anywhere from 295 to 315. 12% body fat. Can't say that is what it is today, but I was the runt on the offensive line.
Wow.
So
little guy.
I was the little guy. So I mean, yes, those guys are all big, so they all look. So you as a fan cannot distinguish really in perspective of really how big you are until you actually came down on the field. And actually, I'll give you another story. I took my son and some of his friends to training camp at San Diego Chargers. And I was standing out on the field watching, the one-on-one drills I used to participate in, and the 2-on-2 collisions were crazy. And I'm watching, I'm just like, whoa, this is just insane. And I came off the field, and my son goes, "You actually used to do that?" Said, yeah, every day. So you kind of lose perspective of the violence of the game unless you're just standing really, or you're right there in the
and that's Richard. That's kind of my perspective in the world of safety. It's you just take for granted that people do things that are inherently dangerous, and by the grace of God, they don't get hurt.
Right.
But one day they do get hurt.
Correct. And
you say, "Wow, what happened?" A lot of I'm sure you can share stories. People that were career ended. Okay,
yep.
Whatever the injury was, it was
yep.
one day they ACL, back, neck, shoulder. I mean, look, let's go back to Tony Romo. Didn't Tony Romo break like every bone in his body? I mean, shoulders, back. The poor guy just got tackled, hellaciously.
Sounds like they should fire his offensive line.
Yeah, and again, he'd come back and just to get another injury, shoulder, collarbone, hand, fingers, you name it, legs, broken legs.
Well, the human body wasn't designed to take the kind of trauma that we put it through in football. It's just not. Some more are than others, and that's what you're seeing elevate all the way to the NFL. I mean, there's guys that played in college, they just can't take the pounding. They're just not built to take it. And like you said before, the cumulative pounding over all those years before you even get to that level, it just eventually, if you take a baseball bat and you pound on something for so many times, eventually something's going to break.
Yeah, and they do break. Let's talk about the long-term safety problems, concussions. Guys your age played in the league 30, 40 years ago. Everything was fine. They retired, went on, had a nice life, and all of a sudden, memory loss, high suicide rates. People, former players, just going into a real deep depressions. Mm-hmm. All that has been clinically related, connected to helmet design or failure of proper helmet design, like head injuries, concussion protocols. Your era of playing, those guys were the most impacted by this, weren't they?
Oh yeah. It's the fact that I'm even talking to you is an amazing thing, based on the lack of equipment we really had. And again, I stated earlier, we used to have a helmet. Literally, the nickname was Concussion Bucket. You also got to remember too, we have the brain is just this mass sitting inside of this, skull of whatever. And so you're really never going to protect it to the full extent that it needs to be protected from the collisions. But anything the biggest stuff that I've seen with the technology is to try and radiate the impact. It disperses, quote unquote, the impact of whatever that is. But because a lot of the symptoms that you talked about earlier, the frontal lobe is really what takes the pounding, which controls all those functions that you were just talking about.
Right.
And so that constantly pounding against the front of your skull, again, all those years, it's actually going to wear.
But is it a slow progression? It's like you don't really even know it. You get a concussion, a couple of days later, you shake it off or think you shake it off, but you actually had brain damage. Every concussion they claim has brain damage. It's
correct.
Micro concussions.
Well, the other thing you're going to learn, and the people, if you really look into it, is the subconcussive blows.
Right.
And the subconcussive blow is really just the thud that you normally go through. And I had a guy years ago, I went to Boston University, they were talking about him. They said the best way to describe it is you climb into a Volkswagen, 30 miles an hour, and run into a brick wall. That's one subconcussive blow. They had it broken down for each position. And so basically they said an average NFL lineman would have about 400 car wrecks a season. So now if you played 4 years, had 1,600. You've been in 1,600 car wrecks just in the NFL. That doesn't count your college, doesn't count your
most car crash dummies don't go through that many car crashes. When you think about it, you've got competition. Yeah. But you're coaching high school football, right?
Yes, I am.
Let's talk about what you teach to younger players today about the sport, about your experience, about your background, about safety. How big of a deal is that as part of your?
Well, for me, the safety is big. It's, again, hitting properly, again, to protect themselves, the equipment that we have, making sure that we have top-of-the-line equipment. One of the things that I demand all my offensive linemen to be is in knee braces. Because knee braces because the kids tend to be not as athletic or agile, and so they will tend to suffer some, bodies being thrown into them, the foot's planted, and all the weight goes on. So making sure that they're equipped properly, all the hand pads and stuff like that. But football is a sport that teaches you really down in the core of challenging yourself beyond what you ever thought was capable. You're hurting, you're bleeding. It also teaches you on a team, it's just not about you, it's about a group of individuals. So there's a lot of great opportunities to teach life lessons within that. And that platform I enjoy teaching that, and competitiveness. And actually not only it's not about winning. For me, I don't teach about winning. I teach about executing your job and doing what you're doing. And then, life, as we all know, will do things and still may not work out the way we want it to. But again, it's all about the effort.
Well, every high school football player that falls in love with the game, or any sport, they all dream of playing in the pros. And I'm sure you see the same thing, Coach. I want to play, in the pros. I want to go play for D1 school. Let's just talk about that transition from high school to Division I college. Okay. Division I university. It's a big change in the game, right? It's a different game, college versus high school. And they're playing on different fields, obviously much more expensive fields, bigger, attendance, night games, lighted games, just the entire facility's changed. But it would seem to me, and stop me if I'm wrong, that the spotlight has kind of a good and bad, reaction. Playing for a high school team is different than playing for, Stanford in California, where you have a televised audience and you're on a stage and you have to perform. You want to perform. You got to get on the field to perform because the camera's not on the sidelines, right, very much. So you got to get on that field. You got to compete. You got to play. And that means bigger, faster. You just have to be better than you were in high school. And oftentimes those safety issues, again, from your experience playing college football before NFL. What was the safety message you received from the college? Did you have any more input on that than you did in the NFL? Did universities say, yeah, player safety is number one? Or, of course, I know the answer to that. Player safety is not number one. But how important was it at the college level, high school to collegiate level?
Well, back in the era that I played, it wasn't even, I don't even remember even having a discussion about player safety.
Wow.
That's the honest answer. Tape your ankles, tape your wrists, make sure you got all your pads on. But no, there was no discussion about player safety.
And, again, I'm not picking on football players because
No.
you can say that about any sport. I mean, it's a game of you got to be on the field to be recognized. You got to be on the field to play the game. Otherwise you're in essence a glorified spectator. And there's a lot of pressure. Did you ever feel the pressure when you were on the field to, hey, I got to perform? I mean, there's a televised audience. Maybe the first time you were on, the photograph we just showed, that was a Monday night game, wasn't it, against Green Bay?
I think by the time you get to that level, you're used to it. I mean, when my first game out of high school, and I went to school in California. I'm not a Texas guy, so these Texas kids are used to playing in front of bigger crowds. But I mean, if I had 3,000 people in the stands, that was a lot of people.
Well, it is a lot of people.
My first game was in Norman, Oklahoma, in front of 110,000 people,
and
it was pretty intense. So
did it change the way you played? Is what I'm getting at. Do you say, hey, I want to be a superstar. I'm willing to take a little bit more chances, take a little bit riskier, moves so I can impress the crowd or impress,
No, I don't think that meant not for me, anyways. I was at that time I was a middle linebacker. At that time, you learn how to focus and zero in on what you were trained to do. So that's all instilled into you already before you hit that.
Is there a science to this, Richard? Is there a way that you take a tackle? I mean, I've talked to other NFL players and they say when you're about to get tackled, you want to relax your whole body. You don't want to be tense. I don't know if that's true or not, but there's a technique to reducing injury in a violent contact game, so you don't get hurt, so you can bounce back up. Any truth to that?
No.
It's just
no. I think that's for all the soccer moms.
I was not a soccer mom who told me that.
Your job is to inflict pain.
Now, say you're inflicting pain. There's a lot of celebration about the inflictor versus the inflicted. It seems like a lot of guys get really hurt and they're like, no, I'm okay, as they kind of limp off the field.
Right.
I'm okay. They're not okay, or they may think they're fine, but they may have some longer injuries. In your tenure, what was your biggest injury that you had?
My biggest injuries, I tore my ACL.
That's a big injury.
Excuse me, my MCL. I actually was playing linebacker against Arizona State, and then the guard came out and literally just tackled me and just took my leg and bent it and popped it right off the femur. But I was fortunate enough to, and well, you talk about pressure to get back in the game. I played 5 more plays, and then I came back off the field after they kicked the field goal, and I said, hey, there's something wrong with my knee. They took my foot and moved it all the way out to the side and back, and I said, hurry up and tape it. I got to get back in the game.
Is that your call? Is that the player's call? Hey, just tape it. I'm okay.
No,
or there's got to be a trainer. There's got to be
the doctor, the trainer that was there. He goes, "You're not going anywhere." You know, I mean, so they generally want to say at that level. They want the safety of the player. I mean, from that aspect, they're not going to throw a kid out there that they know is injured. Mm-hmm. I am not necessarily say I can make that a 100% statement.
Who's in charge of player safety? Whose job is it to make sure the players are safe?
It ultimately rests at the head coach, but that's delegated down to generally a team doctor and the head trainer.
Okay, but with the incentive to win, there's a financial incentive, obviously.
Well,
who's making that tough call sometimes? Like you're not going back into the game.
Talking about professionally, or are we talking about
all the
above?
above?
In the NFL, they've separated it from the standpoint of the team doctor and the head trainer have to make as the ultimate call on that. Very rarely will they, because of all what's happened over the last decade or so. I would argue probably earlier back in the day, there was head coaches probably had more say in it.
And again, you've had how many coaches in your professional tenure?
Yeah.
They're all different, right? They have different they're in the same boat you are, right? They're trying to keep their job. They're trying to get promoted. They're trying to become, be relevant. And it's about wins and losses. And their fabric that they have to depend upon are you, the players, right?
Well, I think the biggest thing they'll ask is, is he good enough to where he can actually still execute what he's got to do?
Something tells me they don't word it that way on the sideline. Is that probably a little bit more aggressive? Maybe
they might be a little more aggressive.
A little bit, a little bit of off-spoken terminology used at that time, because it's a game of testosterone, right? I mean, that's what it's about.
You are 24 years old, ready to roll.
Yeah, and you're invincible. Remember, being 24 was you can live forever, nothing will ever hurt you. So
the frontal lobe hasn't fully developed yet.
So what's your final message here to young people wanting to get into the sport of football? Moms, you mentioned soccer moms. Look, you got a lot of football moms, right? Football they claim is a dying sport in many places, not here in Texas as much. It's part of our culture, but there's a lot of people who don't want their kids to play football because of the injuries, right? I mean, they're worried about the concussion, the lifelong potential disability that might come from that sport. What's your view on that? When you coaching high school, you have parents come to you and say, Richard, I don't know if I really want my kid to be playing this sport.
At the high school level, again, they've done a lot from the standpoint of what type of drills we can run, how long we're actually out on the field, what basic fundamental tackling skills that we're allowed to do. The referees are calling, the type of hits, that we used to be able to do back in the day. They're not allowed to do them anymore. So I think the game is clearly safer than it was back in the era that when I played. I don't know of any other sport that challenges a young man to really find out, does he have what it takes from the standpoint of himself. It's not about the parents. It's not about the kids. I don't like everybody focusing on the D1 scholarships, this and that, because the reality is 99% of them aren't going anywhere.
Do they know that, though? I mean, it seems like a lot of kids.
I think it's more.
They think, I got exactly what it takes. I'm going to be the next, Deion Sanders, and I'll be in D1 and I'll be the starter and I'll have this great career. I mean, it seems like there's a certain, and it's just natural. I mean, it's a fantasy. That's my goal. It's my dream. And, but as you said, the reality is.
Well, Fantasy League, ESPN, I think that pumps a lot of that up. But I think the parents, quite frankly, what their expectations have become of that child and what they've been telling them since they were little going up through the sport, they start to lose themselves as far as, is this for the kid or is it for the parents? And they really need to, why do I want my child to play in a very competitive, very combative sport? What does I really want to achieve? Not just to get a scholarship.
Right.
If their primary goal is to get a scholarship, I'd say you're in the game for the wrong reason, and that's where the damage is done. Because, again, 99% of them aren't going to the next level. If they even go to the next level, their chances of getting through 4 years of it, again, goes down significantly. The attrition factor is huge for various reasons. Education, staying in school, the coaching changes, injuries, and all kinds of stuff. So it's again, I think it's a game you play for as long as you can. If you have that kind of, aggression in you and you like to challenge yourself that way, I think you learn a lot about yourself and life skills that you can actually transfer really into, the real world and really makes you a top performer. And that's really what you should be in the game for.
If you had to do it all over again, if you're a 15-year-old kid, 14-year-old kid.
Would I play? Yeah. In a heartbeat.
You'd go back and play the game.
I'd play the game.
Even knowing the risks, which you have acquired knowledge over your life.
The game has given me so much more and has allowed me to give a lot of young men things that I would have never been able to give them well beyond the game. It's more than just about the game. It's about life, of what we can teach and the life skills that we can teach, the adversity. As much as soccer moms, football moms, we need to make our young men need to be, how to deal with adversity and how to make tough decisions, how to be called and responsible to situations where they're being challenged, and they really got to stand up and be scared a little bit. I mean, scared's good. Being fearful is good. And how to execute within that while you're still doing it. It's not just you're scared, oh, bad, go hide. And it's not and I'm not talking about the bravado being, pounding your chest type of thing. I'm saying just teaching young men courage. Courage is a big word, and learning how to tap that is. I just see more positives than I see negatives in the long run.
Yeah, it's life lessons.
Yep.
Before I let you go, one question. It's been on my mind. What team did you really, really want to play for in the NFL? Or you played for the Giants, you played for the Chargers. Mm-hmm. Was there a team that you said, man, I want to make?
Well, when I was a kid, I was a big fan of the Packers and the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Bart Starr.
Yeah. I remember watching that game in the frozen tundra. And then
yeah.
Jack Lambert was my big idol on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the irony of that story is I actually got to play against Jack Lambert my first game in the NFL.
Wow.
So he lined up across from me in my first game. So I got to at least be around it. But those were my two teams, I would argue, that as a kid, I said, if I could play for. But you need to understand, I didn't have a vision. Again, unlike kids today, I didn't have ESPN, all this other stuff they have. I didn't have a vision of saying, hey, I'm going to go be a football player. It just kind of happened. My goal was to get a college education. When all of a sudden football actually gave me a scholarship, I said, wow, okay, I can go get a college education.
You've been blessed, Richard Umphrey.
No doubt.
You've been blessed, and I really appreciate you spending the time with us today talking about the subject of player safety and some of the implications related to player safety and some personal experiences that you've had in your growth, and really appreciate you coming out and talking to us today.
Appreciate your time, partner.
You're welcome. Richard Umphrey, number 59.